After signing Jorge Polanco, the Mariners roster is reportedly set. If that's the case, what is this team ceiling? We'll answer that and more coming up here on Mailbag Monday. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, February 3rd, 2025. This is Tidy Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll be opening up the mailbag like we do here every Monday and answering some of your Mariners questions. But before we do that, quick shout out to our title sponsor today, FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. All you have to do to check that out is click the link in the description of this episode. Kicking us off here on Mailbag Monday is Blake, who wants to know, with the Mariners reportedly being done making moves, what's one player not currently on the Major League roster that you think will have an impact on the team this upcoming season?
I think the obvious answer here is Cole Young. I mean, I'm assuming we're talking about guys in the organization right now who aren't supposed to be on the opening day roster, or at the very least are fighting pretty serious uphill battles to make the opening day roster. So I think Cole Young is the obvious one here. I think unfortunately, if the Mariners are indeed done, they've kind of built this thing where it's like, it's not impossible, I suppose, for Young to make the opening day roster, unfortunately, which is not how you should build this thing at all. We've talked about this a lot, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, like Dylan Moore and Ryan Bliss aren't exactly hardy competition to stick in front of Cole Young to be the everyday second baseman. So maybe he makes the club out of, spring training, although I think he'd have to be like arguably one of the best players in camp for that to even be a conversation.
You'd have to have like a Julio level camp.
Right. It's not necessarily about the numbers, but I do think he would actually have to perform a little bit too and put up some pretty good numbers.
Like he would have to leave quite the impression, in the same way that Julio did a couple of years ago.
Right. And also they'd have to, I mean, even then, like, you could just leave him down for a couple of weeks, service time him, and like that's totally legitimate. Like you can make the argument that that's the best thing to do anyways. It's one of those things where I think Young is the obvious answer here. There are a couple more guys that make some sense. I know Ty's got one. But yeah, Cole Young is the super obvious answer. He could be, your everyday second baseman. I mean, I suppose theoretically he could be your opening day second baseman, but more than likely we're talking about, I don't know, late May, early June at the earliest. Hopefully it's because he's just too good to ignore and not the Mariners second baseman are struggling so much that they have to take a shot on Cole Young.
Yeah, the answer is obviously Cole Young because he has the easiest, most feasible path to being an everyday player and being an impactful everyday player for the Mariners in 2025. But I'll throw out an alternative just to give you a different answer. I'll throw out Brandon Garcia, who's probably not going to make the team out of camp. I think he'll have a legitimate shot to do so out of the bullpen, not as a starter. And I think the stuff will play up pretty well out of the bullpen. And I think this team is at some point over the course of the season going to be looking for another high leverage option. I think Garcia has the upside to potentially be that. I'm not sure if he'll actually be that guy, but I think he does have the potential to get there. And I just think that he offers a bit more upside than someone like Taylor Saucedo or Gabe Spire or any other lefty that the Mariners have in their organization right now. Another name I'll throw out there, just because he's not written in pen on the 26-man roster, but does have a shot of making the roster out of camp, Austin Shenton. He had a pretty good cup of coffee at the big league level. Maybe he's a late bloomer and he'll actually give you something with the bat. Next question coming from Aaron. Can't imagine an off season where Trader Jerry doesn't pull off at least one trade for a starting player. Who's your prediction for most likely trade target who will be starting opening day? It is a bit weird that the only trades that the Mariners have made have been essentially waiver claims this offseason. We had another one today.
Mm-hmm. Just cash for a guy that was recently DFA'd. So yeah, this is an interesting question. Like, who's the most likely starter that the Mariners could acquire before opening day? Don't think that's likely, although I do think that early season trades and spring training trades are going to start to become a little more relevant in our game. And
We actually have a question about that later on.
yeah, I don't think it's going to be anything too crazy. But again, if you're telling me that the Mariners are going to acquire a starter, like somebody who will be in their opening day lineup, between now and opening day, who's the most likely guy that would be? I mean, Nico Horner, I guess. Like,
I don't even know about that.
I just I mean, it's a bullpen arm, but I think you're asking for like a starting 9 type of guy. Probably be a second baseman. And Horner's the guy we know they like the most, but unless they sign Bregman and the Mariners could find a way to clear some money, even that seems unlikely. So I'm not really sure, the answer here, because Brandon Lau would certainly be high on that list, but again, unless they clear the money. So yeah, I don't know if there is a.
I mean, can Jose Iglesias fall in their lap for $3 to $4 million? Because that's probably all they have to spend at this point.
Yeah, and they talked about wanting to save that for whatever.
Yeah.
BS, by the way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, like, now, because you specifically asked for a trade, not a free agent, it's probably Lau or Horner, and neither of those guys are that likely. Maybe a Willie Castro, but again, the money thing.
Yeah, and again, all these guys that you're mentioning are making more money than what we think the front office has left to spend.
Right. So, like, I just don't think it's all that likely that they're going to add anybody via trade that would automatically be in their starting 9, just because of their track record. It's possible they make maybe like a prospect for prospect swap, or there's a pre-arb like guy who didn't have, like, I don't know, like you talked about Richie Palacios, like maybe there's some kind of weird trade there, and he
works are they able to get Palacios? Are they able to get like Jonah Bride or someone like that that's not making any money? Maybe, but
that's unlikely at this stage. So yeah, I'm not sure there is somebody likely to be in the starting lineup on opening day that you can go get right now in the trade market. So yeah, like pretty much any reliever that you can think of that's not making a lot of money is probably the answer. Like an Anthony Bender, but
this year is Gregory Santos, essentially.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think that guy is like that type of player is the spirit of the question. Is that's who you're looking for Andrew Nardi. So yeah, I just don't see it.
Yeah. Just in the spirit of the question, I think the answer is no one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. All right. Well, we are going to answer more of your questions here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is once again brought to you by FanDuel. All right, folks, Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. It is Mailbag Monday. We're answering your Mariners questions. We got this one from Valik, who wants to know simply, what is the ceiling of this current team, in your opinion? So if this roster is set, as Adam Jude reported on, Friday, what do you think the ceiling is for this roster, Colby?
Well, ceiling is obviously the key term here. As it's set right now, the ceiling, 90 to 95 wins, I think is probably the ceiling. Because again, we're talking about Julio, sustaining success for an entire year. We're talking about Robles repeating what he did last year. You're talking about a full year of a Rosarena, who's hopefully a little better than he was last year. Everybody stays healthy, blah, blah, blah. So I
Right.
think,
The absolute best case scenario, the
yeah, for
100th
every individual
percentile.
player, right.
Yeah.
If that happens, then I guess probably like the 100th percentile for every single player, probably 100 wins, but that's true of most teams, like a lot of
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah.
So like, I think if you're looking at like the 90th, 80th to 90th percentile for most guys, I think they could probably win, between 90 and 95 games as it sits right now. And obviously, they could add in season and guys could pop who we're not even counting on the 26 man right now. But yeah, I feel like their absolute upside is, like 95 wins. But again, that's the upside play.
Right. Yeah. I think maybe what you're looking for is more so like, what do we think, like, realistically this team winds up if things go pretty well?
Like you get reasonable health, you get reasonable, like,
Yeah.
but like slightly
Victor
above
Robles
average, but it's still
Victor
pretty
Robles
good.
regresses, but he's still pretty good.
Right.
Julio
repeats,
sustains more, but maybe he's
right.
not an MVP candidate.
Maybe
Stuff
he's
like
a
that.
6.5 win player.
Yeah.
And Cal
Yeah.
kind of does what he does, and the pitching's healthy. Yeah, if all that happens, I think about 90. Like I still think it's a pretty good team. Which again,
Yeah.
as we talked about, is why it's so frustrating that they seem to be done adding to this team, because it's a really good team right now, and it could be great with just a little bit more commitment. So yeah, I think if all that happens, I could still see 90.
Yeah. I think they're like an 88 to 90 win team under those circumstances. Right now, how I feel about this team in general, I think this is probably an 84 to 86 win team, like a wild card contender. And if the AL West underperforms like it did this past year, then probably a division contender as well, even in that range.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's always about like ranges, and my range is always like plus or minus 8 games. So like if I say they're an 85 win team, then basically what I'm saying is I could see them win anywhere between 77 and like 93 games, depending on health and rebounding and, all that breakout and stuff like that. So the floor should be higher, and they could absolutely still make it higher. But based on what we know right now, they're choosing not to for reasons.
Nate wants to know, with $7.75 million of the Mariners' ridiculous self-imposed budget going to Polanco, is there a way that the financials add up to still get someone like Luis Robert Jr., that is, or Jesus Sanchez, as mentioned on the Patreon podcast? What are the chances the M's are even still looking to do something like this? So I would say no on Robert, even with the report that the White Sox are willing to eat some of the money. I just don't think you're going to be able to get them to eat enough. Unless they're willing to take on like Mitch Haniger or Garver, where it actually falls within your budget with what you have left, what the front office has unfortunately been given from ownership. Like, let's make that very clear distinction. Jesus Sanchez, though, he avoided arbitration at a number of $4.5 million, so you could probably make that work still with what you have left.
Yeah, and maybe it's like you include Trent Thornton in the deal, so he's only a $2 million player, or something like that. I think to answer your question, any like serious addition who's making above league minimum, the Mariners are probably going to have to clear some payroll. So yeah, I mean, like, could they go get Luis Robert if they move Mitch Haniger? Like, could they go get Luis Arise or Jake Cronenworth or Robert Suarez or whatever? Like, maybe if they move Mitch Garver, yeah. And I still think that the Mariners are like willing and probably pretty eager to move Haniger's contract if they can at any kind of reasonable rate. But the fact that they haven't yet, probably tells you what teams are asking for to eat even a chunk of that money. So, we'll see. But could they still go out and add like an everyday type of player? Sure. But they probably are going to have to clear salary one way or the other. And obviously, the more money the player is making, the more likely it is that you have to move Haniger before that's even a possibility. But guys who are ARB1 making, $2 to $4 million, like, sure, I think they would probably, in the right deal, they would probably find a way to make that fit just fine. But once you start talking about 6, 7, 10, $15 million guys, they're going to have to move Haniger or Garver, more than likely one of those two, to accommodate that.
You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. C. Christensen wants to know, are they still considering trading Luis Castillo? And if yes, what is the plan to replace him? No, I think that train left the station in December. Around the winter meetings. And I think you can thank the Houston Astros for that, because pretty much coincided with Dana Brown announcing that, hey, yeah, we're listening on Kyle Tucker, that all those talks that we had heard about that the Mariners were having with the Cubs about Nico Horner and a potential 3-team deal with the White Sox and the Cubs, that all died as soon as Kyle Tucker became available. And then sure enough, the Cubs wound up acquiring Tucker. They trade Isaac Paredes, which now makes Nico Horner more important to them. And there you have it. And also, I think the Mariners were trying to kind of fit in this tight window of essentially turning Castillo into Nico Horner and Christian Walker. And then they aren't able to get the Horner deal done. And then Walker also signs with the Astros. Right. So again, you can thank the Astros for all of this.
Yay. So there was a report yesterday that the Mariners are less likely to trade Luis Castillo than they were, which, no kidding. Like, yeah, duh. There was also a mention that, like, the Twins did check in on Castillo, and we didn't really talk about the Twins.
That's weird.
And, they do have a lot of pieces that would make sense for Seattle. The problem is that they have a stingier ownership group than you do, even though that ownership group is literally selling the team in April. So I don't know what they're doing there, but I don't know how they would eat all that money. So I would say Castillo, like, the odds that he's not on the opening day roster, or he's not in the organization on opening day because he might get hurt, who knows? But the odds of that being the case, like 3 to 5% at this stage, I think.
I'd put it even lower than that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I just don't think it makes sense anymore. I don't think it made sense a month ago.
No, because like you talked about, or like the whoever asked this question, I forget. Like they said, like, what's the plan to replace him? Well, I'm of the belief that the plan all along was to get his replacement in the trade, and I think that's why the Red Sox thing didn't work out. I think the Mariners were holding out for Cutter Crawford, and they couldn't get him. It's kind of weird on the Red Sox side of things not to do that, but whatever, they didn't, and so that was dead. I do think they were probably going to lever, or they were probably trying to at least acquire like a Javier Assad type to at least be kind of a true number 5. So yeah, I do think that there was some, part of the reason why the Mariners were frustrated by the packages they were getting for Castillo is because they couldn't check off all the boxes like we talked about. And so clearing most of the salary, getting a player who plays for you every day in 2025 and replacing Castillo it's a lot to ask any team to accommodate for you. So yeah, I just don't think that they were going to, even now, like you look at Flaherty, he basically gets $25 million guaranteed, for a 1 year. That's not something the Mariners were going to be willing to do. So yeah, I think they're not going to do it now. And I think the only way they were ever going to do it was if they got a arm back in the deal that they felt like they could reasonably have be the number 5 starter this year. And that's ultimately why I think the deal wasn't done. Because I think if it was just about getting a bat or two for him, I think Luis Castillo would have been traded. I just don't think they got the arm that they wanted back in the deal. And we also heard that they were looking at arms from the Red Sox. And I think that, again, just reading between the lines and everything I've heard and read about that particular thing, I think that was, we like Casas, but we would need like Crawford as well to trade Castillo because you're not better in 2025 with Casas than you are with Castillo if you can't replace Castillo.
Last question of the day comes from Campbell, and this is something that you touched upon a little earlier. Colby. Campbell heard Shannon Dreyer on 710 say she wouldn't rule out trades earlier in the year if teams underperform. Do you guys think that can become the new normal? Not many rebuilding teams in the offseason year in and year out. I mean, it would have to be a team that we're not expecting to fall off the table, right? Because like we all expect the Marlins to be bad, the Rockies to be bad, the White Sox to be bad. But those teams, that doesn't change anything. Those teams, by all accounts, are already willing to take prospects, pure prospect returns for their major league talent. So it would have to be someone like the Cardinals out of nowhere, just being abysmal. Or, the Twins, or, just pick a team that we're not expecting to be god awful to start the year.
Right. And I mean, it probably has to be a team, or it probably won't even be in April, because like you could go 7-18 in April and still totally make the playoffs. Like,
I mean, it would have to be something similar to what happened to the Marlins last year, right? When they finally decided to trade Arise to San Diego. And when did that happen?
Mid-May, I think.
Yeah, like it was pretty early on, but like the Marlins were trash.
You kind of have to look around and be like, okay, who's that team that could go, 11-33 out of the gate, and you're just like, wow, like might as well jump the market. And I think the Cardinals are a good one, because the Cardinals are a team that want to at least do some kind of soft rebuild at the very least. Yep. And they've accomplished nothing this entire offseason. They haven't been able to move Arenado. They're not going to be able to move Sonny Gray, at least as things sit right now. They haven't gotten Donovan signed to an extension. They haven't gotten Helsley signed to an extension. And those are all guys who, ironically, the Mariners could really use, but they're also guys who they should trade. And if you trade a Ryan Helsley in, the middle of May, you're going to get more than if you wait until July, because obviously the team acquiring him gets 10, 15 more appearances out of him. I think the Cardinals are a good candidate for this. They could just hover around 500 though, long enough, and get to the deadline, kind of like the Rays last year, and then decide that they're going to sell. I think the Cardinals are a good candidate for this. I don't think that like the Giants would entertain that. They just have too much, invested in this roster. But that is a team I could see struggle really early and then just kind of bail. I think, the Cardinals are probably the team you're looking at here. Maybe Toronto, but, we've seen how they've operated this winter, and good on them for spending money and going after players. Must be nice. But that is not a very good roster. Tampa, I could also see, kind of doing the whole Marlins thing as well. So there might be a few teams out there that fit this mold. And I think it also takes a team that doesn't have a lot to lose. Like Marlins, they know their fans weren't going to show up one way or another, so they can sell early. They're not worried about selling a couple extra tickets. And I think a team like Tampa would fall into that category as well. And also, technically Miami, like they might get to May and be like, hey, let's just start trading some of our bullpen guys. Let's trade Sanchez. Why not? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's possible we see a move like this. Has Jerry Dipoto ever made a move well before, the trade season to kind of bolster a good roster that desperately needs help? Yes, he has. It was a while ago, but yes, he has. So, I think it's definitely a possibility.
All right, well, we got a couple more minutes here that we can play around with. Hey, you want to tell us about the new pitcher the Mariners got today? Casey Legumina, I think.
Lagoon Man?
Yeah, the Lagoon Man.
Sure. He's a warm body. He attended Gonzaga, like other baseball greats. I got nothing. Did Ryan Sandberg? I know he's from
Marco Gonzalez went to
there
Gonzaga.
You go. Boom. Yeah. By the way, bring Marco back on a minor league deal. Anti-France while we're at it. Why not?
Yeah,
vibes.
Why not?
The arm, whose name I still don't know how to pronounce. Laguma.
I believe it is Legumina
Beach.
And he is definitely a real person and not a Final Fantasy character.
Yes, I actually purchased his card for my collection because unfortunately he does have like 12 games in the big leagues. Mm-hmm. He's a righty. Again, he's from went to school at Gonzaga. He is a pretty extreme side armor, just slightly above a true sidearm slot. It's 93 to 94 mile an hour sinker. Slider had a 29% whiff rate in the big leagues last year. Got torched this year. Based on what I can tell, he's just in the middle of the plate too much. But there is some funk to his delivery. What's interesting is in 2023, he was getting down the mound quite a bit. Like he had a really high extension number. This last year, it was only slightly above league average. So it feels like they shortened him up a little bit. The Reds did in an attempt to get him to throw more strikes. And it appears to have worked because he did throw a lot of strikes this year. But he is an extreme ground ball pitcher. That's kind of what you want from him. Sinker, slider, righty. Not a ton of swing and miss as far as we can see right now. Could this be an instance of the Mariners, Paul Sewalding him and being like, hey, throw the fastball up in the zone and get whiffs that way? Maybe, but I think this is just kind of a warm body that you stick in AAA. He can come up in the middle innings, in May and give you an inning and a third and get a couple ground balls and all of that. It's just a more valuable player than Jonathan Diaz. At least the Mariners seem to think so. Sure. So, yeah, I think, this is just another arm to throw on the pile. Nothing super exciting about him. Again, kind of a unique arm slot, and he seems to kind of be in between here. Do you want him to have the high extension? Do you want him to be, shorten up and throw more strikes? Like, you're probably not going to miss a ton of bats anyways. Like, extreme sample, like extreme high end, maybe you can get him to be another Colin Snyder, but I don't think he's got the swing and miss stuff. But, Snyder wasn't exactly striking out a ton of dudes when the Mariners got their hands on him either. So we'll see, but it's just another arm in the pile. It's a ground ball guy. It's a middle relief guy. It's, kind of JT Chargois-ish. So whatever, but probably one of those, $1 trade type of guys.
Sure.
The Tony Zick, David McKay type.
Yep. Last question.
Oh.
How does the Luka trade impact the Mariners? Break it down for us.
Well, I mean, like, the good news is that I heard that he's also going to have to play second base for the Dodgers. So that might free up, Max Muncy even more.
There we go.
So, yeah. Now, would the Mariners pay for Max Muncy and his $12 million? Maybe if they got Bronny Jr. back. But, LeBron probably not too happy about that. But
probably. You would have to get LeBron as well, which, darn.
Yeah, is LeBron worth it? Is he honestly worth it? Like, is he even that good anymore? Would he just put up a triple double in Madison Square Garden the other day? Like,
yeah, he did. Yeah,
yeah. Is he even worth it? Like, 40 years old, he's still like one of the 10 best players in the league.
Yeah, I know everyone's looking for like other sport equivalent trades to that. I'll just say this: I don't think there is one. I think that
unicorn.
That trade is in its own realm. That's the craziest trade I've ever seen in any sport ever in my time watching sports. You and I were talking about this off air though. Like, if I had to come up with just a fake major league trade that would be essentially the equivalent of that, it'd be something like Bobby Witt Jr. for Mike Trout. Because like Trout, like Anthony Davis, when he's healthy, still a top 15, top 20 player in the league, but he's just not healthy often.
He's also in 30s compared to the young mid 20s superstar.
Yeah. And Bobby Witt Jr. is one of the very few true untouchables in the league right now. So yeah, which we thought the same for Luka, but that apparently was not the case.
One idiot.
Yeah.
Shout out to our homies at Locked On Mavs. I'm sure this has been a
I happen to watch a couple of their episodes and
this?
I feel for those guys.
How was the funeral service?
Did you see the videos, by the way? Yeah.
Of the three guys bringing a casket down.
Yeah. A lot of people leaving their jerseys. Being a Mariners fan, it's nice to see a different organization that I'm not a fan of do something stupid and have their fans rebel against them. It's nice for a change.
It is. It is fun sometimes to be like, I mean, like, things could be worse.
Sure.
The Mariners haven't traded Julio yet. I mean, like, notice I said yet. Things could be worse. But, at least the Mavs went to the finals last year.
Well, that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Badnode, I'm Tight Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Tight Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.